All right, thank you for having me here today. I'm Yihao, a PhD candidate in marketing at Wharton. Have you ever thought why we can watch most of the shows on only one streaming platform and how this exclusivity affect us consumers as well as studios and streaming platforms? Today, I'm presenting my paper titled Exclusive Contracts in the Video Streaming Market, in which we will explore these questions together. In the video streaming market, 87% of the titles are available on only one streaming platform. Such exclusive distribution is often facilitated by exclusive contracts where studios grant exclusive licensing rights of specific titles to specific streaming services. For example, Netflix has exclusive licensing rights to Seinfeld from Warner Brothers, and Hulu has exclusive rights to Fargo from FX Networks. Despite their prevalence, exclusive contracts are controversial. They are often under regulatory scrutiny due to the worry that large firms may use them to gain unfair competitive advantages against small firms. For example, back in 1930s and 40s, most movies were also only exclusively available through specific theaters. And this lasted till 1948, when the Supreme Court deemed large studios' exclusion from small independent theaters illegal. In the current video streaming market, small platforms often complain about the difficulty to compete with large guys like Netflix and Amazon because they are able to secure more exclusive deals from studios. Consumers also complain about the rising cost of streaming, partly because now they have to subscribe to so many streaming platforms at the same time to access all the content they want. However, existing literature also say that exclusive contracts in the long term may improve studio profitability and stimulate them to produce more content, which may benefit consumers. All these controversies suggest that it's important for us to understand who gains and who loses from exclusive contracts, which is the focus of this paper. To address this question, we need to firstly understand why exclusive contracts are so prevalent. It's driven by two forces. First, streaming services want to use exclusive contracts to license unique content so that they can differentiate from competitors, soften competition, and improve profitability. Another important but understudied reason is that studios often use these exclusive contracts as a bargaining tool against streaming platforms. By restricting the contracts to be exclusive, the studios can play the streaming services off against each other to negotiate more favorable deals. And here is an example from last year. Amazon Prime and Netflix had a bidding war for the exclusive rights to an upcoming show, Crime 101. So what the studio did was to bring Netflix's bid to Amazon and ask if Amazon was willing to pay more. And in the end, Amazon outbid Netflix with $90 million. As a result of such practices, hefty licensing deals are very common in this market. In this paper, I developed a structural model to capture these two forces. The model incorporates consumer demand for both titles and subscriptions and subscription price setting by streaming platforms. And importantly, I add to the literature by fully endogenizing the formation of contracts between streaming platforms and studios so that I can capture the effect of bargaining in the formation of exclusive contracts. And the estimation of this model is made possible because I'm the first researcher to put up 6 brand new, highly detailed datasets from various sources. As a side note here, I don't specifically model title production because in my study period 2021 and 2022, studios faced significant capacity constraint due to COVID-induced surge in demand. However, I do explore how the changes in title production could affect consumer welfare in counterfactuals. Taking the model and the estimates, I quantify the effects of welfare of exclusive contracts by studying a counterfactual in which exclusive contracts are prohibited. I find that surprisingly, small streaming platforms and small studios gain from exclusive contracts, while the larger guys see minimal or negative impacts. Small streaming platforms gain because they don't have much in-house content and therefore rely on licensing exclusive third-party content for differentiation and competitiveness. Small studios can, because of their weak bargaining power and therefore reliance on using exclusive contracts as a bargaining tool. Consumers generally lose from exclusive contracts due to both reduced title availability and increased subscription prices. And these loss would persist even if studios significantly increase their content production. Now, let me introduce a stylized model to illustrate the force of bargaining and differentiation in the formation of exclusive contracts. Let's consider a scenario with one studio, Paramount, licensing one title, Emily in Paris, to a distribution network of streaming platforms. It could be Netflix only, Hulu only, or both. Paramount makes this decision based on the licensing fees it can collect from streaming platforms, which are denoted as TAUs here. Okay? And these TAUs, in turn, are negotiated depending on the sales profits the streaming platforms can realize on the different distribution networks. And I assume these profits to follow the numbers here below the streaming service logos. These numbers are made as examples here, but I will estimate them empirically. Okay. I adopt the bargaining framework from the Ho and Lee paper to determine the bargaining outcomes of the licensing fees. When Paramount licenses this title non-exclusively to both Netflix and Hulu, it can acquire a share of their sales profits proportional to its bargaining power, which is denoted as B and assumed to be 0.5, which means that Paramount can get half of the sales profits from both streaming platforms, which generate a total payoff of 8. Alternatively, Paramount can commit to distribute this title to only one streaming platform, possibly through exclusive contracts. And in this case, Paramount will have the ability to go back and forth between Netflix and Hulu and ask which platform is willing to pay more. Hulu is willing to pay up to 7, and Paramount can bring this bid to Netflix. Netflix will absolutely match this offer because it will still earn a profit of 5. Therefore, in this case, Paramount will earn a profit of payoff of 7 from Netflix alone. Notice here, an exclusive contract with Hulu is not an option. This is because Hulu is only willing to pay up to 7, but Netflix is always willing to pay more. As the owner of the title, Paramount will choose a distribution network that maximizes payoff. And in this case, it will choose to distribute the title non-exclusively to both streaming platforms. Now, let's look at another example. Now, assuming that the distributing to both streaming platforms is much less profitable, and it can be caused by reasons, for example, like multi-homing. Suppose now in the market, everyone has already has subscriptions to either Netflix or Hulu. And in this case, if the title is added non-exclusively to both streaming platforms, no user will add any subscription to her basket because she already has access to this show. And in this case, Paramount will opt for an exclusive distribution to Netflix because it will enlarge the pie to be divided between Netflix and itself, possibly through differentiation. Here is another example where exclusive contracts can arise even when the joint profits are lower. Now let's reinstall the profitability of non-exclusive distribution to be the same as in the first example. But now, instead of Paramount, it's EC'24 licensing this title. As a recently founded small independent studio, EC'24 may have a bargaining power much weaker than Paramount. Therefore, I assume it to be 0.25 here. Now, even though non-exclusive distribution can generate a larger pie to be divided, EC'24 can only get a small slice of this large pie because of its weak bargaining power. Therefore, instead, it will opt for an exclusive distribution to Netflix so that it can use Hulu as a threat to negotiate a good deal from Netflix. Altogether, these examples show that exclusive contracts can arise because studios want to use them to negotiate favorable licensing deals. either by committing to a more jointly profitable distribution network, which can happen because of this differentiation as shown in the second example, or to use exclusive contracts as a bargaining tool to negotiate a more favorable deal as shown in the last example. More importantly, the last example shows that studios with weaker bargaining power are more inclined to use exclusive distribution because otherwise they can't extract much licensing fees from their bargaining counterparties. And this inverse relationship is supported by the data. I find that the big 5 studios, which produce about half of the content in this market and are generally perceived to have stronger bargaining power, are about 4 percentage points less likely to use exclusive distribution compared with small studios. In the next step, I developed this stylized model into a full 3-stage empirical model. In the first stage, the studios negotiate bilateral contract. The streaming platforms negotiate bilateral contracts with studios and set subscription prices at the same time. In the second and third stages, consumers choose subscriptions and titles respectively. And the estimation of this model is feasible because I collect data from various sources, which cover almost every aspect of this market, except for the detailed contractual terms such as licensing fees. And I will recover these terms from using my structural model. On the demand side, consumers choose which titles to watch following I model which consumers choosing which title to watch using a random coefficient logic model. And before viewership, households choose which streaming platforms to subscribe to, considering both this utility from prices as well as the content viewership utility derived by all its household members. And importantly, this model has several features. First, it incorporates heterogeneous preferences for different genres. And this flexibility can be identified because I observe title viewership with demographic breakdowns. So for example, how many minutes do African American women spend on Ozark in a given week? In addition, I allow households to multi-home to subscribe to multiple streaming platforms at the same time. And this feature can be identified because my data, I can observe the market shares for each combination of streaming platforms. So for example, how many households in the New York City subscribe to Netflix and Amazon Prime, but not Disney Plus and Hulu. On the supply side, I model streaming platforms choosing subscription prices by maximizing their profits with expectations to consumer demand. Using the profit margins recovered from this pricing model, as well as the demand model, I can then decipher how much a streaming platform can gain by licensing a title. And the streaming platform will divide this gain with studios in negotiations. The studio can either extract a share of this gain proportional to its bargaining power, which is denoted as B here, or to use the other excluded streaming platforms as a threat and ask the included streaming platform to match the maximum offer from those excluded streaming platforms. With this division rule, a distribution network can then be defined as an equilibrium outcome if it satisfies 2 conditions. First, it's stable, as in the stylized model. If Paramount decides to license the title to Netflix instead of Hulu, it must be that Hulu cannot outbid Netflix. And second, it's optimal in that among all the stable networks, the observed network should be profit maximizing for the studio. And I estimate this supply model using data on title availability alone. I find that indeed the big 5 studios exhibit much stronger bargaining power than the small studios, suggesting that small studios may rely more on using exclusive contracts as a bargaining tool. Using the model and the estimates, I studied a counterfactual in which exclusive contracts are prohibited. And then I quantify the effects of exclusive contracts by comparing this counterfactual with the status quo. I find that small streaming platforms actually gain from exclusive contracts, and it's because they don't have much in-house content and rely on licensing exclusive third-party content for differentiation and competitiveness. The large streaming platforms actually see small or negative impacts from exclusive contracts. This is because they already have a lot of unique in-house content, and therefore their gain from licensing additional exclusive titles is much smaller compared to the smaller streaming platforms. In addition, with a lot of exclusive titles, the small streaming platforms become real competitors against the big guys and are able to attract a lot of previous subscribers from them, which drives down the profitability of the larger guys. On the studio side, I find that the big five studios see loss, while small studios gain from exclusive contracts. The big five studios lost because of a negative equilibrium effect. This is because with exclusive contracts, now the streaming platforms are very differentiated from each other. They have a lot of unique content so that they have a lot of loyal subscribers. In this case, the streaming platforms now feel less about dropping the title because fewer subscribers will leave them. So in this case, all the streaming platforms will have a lower willingness to pay for licensing the title. However, the small studios can overcome this adverse effect because now with exclusive contracts, they can use them as a bargaining tool. They can threat one streaming platform by replacing it with another competitor of it. And in addition, with the increased profitability of the small streaming platforms, now they become credible threat for the small studios in negotiations with bigger guys. However, with their already strong bargaining power, those big five studios do not get much from this improved bargaining leverage, and therefore see an overall loss. Consumers generally lose from exclusive contracts due to both increased subscription prices and reduced title availability. In the long term, small studios may be willing to increase their title production because with exclusive contracts, they see their profitability goes up. However, I find that the loss of consumers persists even when small studios increase their title production by a third. This is because streaming platforms will now use the additional titles produced by small studios to further differentiate themselves and increase subscription prices. And these harm from increased prices offset the gain by consumers from more content. Overall, in this paper, I study the impact of exclusive contracts in the video streaming market. I fully endogenize the formation of licensing contracts between studios and streaming platforms, and I identify the bargaining powers of firms using only network data. I find that the small studios and small streaming platforms generally benefit from exclusive contracts in this market, while the larger guys see minimal or negative impacts. Consumers lose from exclusive contracts due to both restricted title availability and increased subscription prices, and this loss even persists when studios significantly improve their title production. Thank you. Any questions?